The world celebrated as if history had been rewritten. News anchors smiled. Headlines flashed. IMF cancels $3 billion in African debt. To the West, it looked like a miracle, a sudden act of mercy. But in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso didn't smile. He leaned forward, clenched his fist, and whispered, "Behind their smiles, there is always a trap." And in that moment, he saw what few dared to admit. Debt forgiveness rarely comes free. The gift that wasn't in TV. The words sounded divine. Debt relief, opportunity, hope. Western leaders posed for cameras, calling it the dawn of a new partnership. But Traoré asked a different question. What does Africa give in return? His doubt wasn't cynicism, it was memory. For decades, Africa has lived through conditional loans, structural adjustments, and austerity programs. Why, after centuries of extracting gold, oil, and uranium from African soil, would the West suddenly play savior? Was this debt cancellation a blessing, or the start of a new kind of colonial contract? On paper, $3 billion vanished overnight. Nations rushed to sign a signature here, a handshake thereon. Billions seemed to disappear. But behind the polished words lay terms as slippery as oil, commodity-backed, resource secured. For ordinary citizens, these sounded like harmless technicalities. For leaders reading carefully, it was something else. Collateral, not erased with kindness, but exchanged for Africa's lifeblood gold bars. Oil fields, uranium mines. One country pledged nearly half its future oil revenues. Another mortgaged 25 tons of gold worth over $1.8 billion. And all for what? A clean balance sheet. The IMF smiled for the cameras. But in African villages, people began asking, is this freedom, or just another chain with a new design? The refusal, and like others, Traoré refused to sign. He saw that relief tied to resources wasn't generosity, was repossession with diplomatic perfume. He knew that once gold is collateral, sovereignty slips away. So instead of reaching for a pen, he built something else, a covert financial investigation. Unit auditors, economists, intelligence officers, their mission, tear open the contracts and expose the hidden strings. What they found was chilling. Clauses demanded repayment not in dollars, but in barrels of oil and kilograms of uranium, often at discounted prices far below market value. Imagine selling oil at $50 a barrel, while the world buys it at $72. Over 10 years, that gap bleeds billions. Was this debt relief, or quiet plunder dressed in polite language? Neo-colonialism in new clothes. The deeper they dug, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't relief, it was neo-colonialism 2.0. Instead of soldiers and treaties, now signatures and spreadsheets were the weapons. Investigators uncovered a leaked dossier stamped Phoenix Dollar Commodity Stabilization Program. Its contents were explosive. Africa's resources earmarked as collateral for a new U.S. digital currency. The so-called Phoenix Dollar meant to counter China's rising digital yuan. Gold, oil, uranium. Africa's assets were penciled into America's blueprint for financial supremacy. Without Africa's consent, its soil was drafted into a global currency war. If true, this meant Africa wasn't being freed, it was being pawned as the collateral of someone else's empire. Transparency is a weapon. Traoré realized the greatest weapon wasn't secrecy, it was transparency. He prepared to go public. Before a packed hall, cameras rolling, he unfolded the contracts clause by clause. Then came the final blow. He held up the leaked Phoenix Dollar dossier. "This is not debt relief," he declared. "This is theft disguised as generosity." Screens lit up across Africa. Farmers, teachers, traders, all saw the numbers for themselves. Gold sold at $2,450 an ounce in New York. Forced from African exporters at $1,650. Oil trading globally at $75. Mortgaged away at $50. Shock spread like wildfire. On social media, hashtags ignited. Hashtag not relief but robbery. Hashtag Phoenix Dollar Trap. A movement is born from Ouagadougou to Lagos, from Bamako to Johannesburg. The reaction was electric. Students marched. Journalists dissected the clauses live on air. Farmers declared their harvests would never again be collateral. Even an elderly man in Burkina Faso spoke words that became a rallying cry. "I would rather my children inherit debt than slavery disguised as relief." Could words, raw, unpolished, carry more weight than armies? The domino effect. Western media painted Traoré as reckless, anti-Western, even dangerous. But their character attacks couldn't erase the numbers ordinary Africans had already seen. Soon, one by one, countries began pulling back. Niger suspended participation. Mali swore its gold would never again be collateral. Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria all launched reviews. Brussels panicked. A leaked EU memo whispered, "Africans caught us." Markets trembled. Gold futures spiked. Uranium prices soared. Oil traders added risk premiums. The very nations once dismissed as weak had rattled Wall Street and Paris. Washington reacts. Donald Trump went on air, fuming. He called Traoré a radical soldier sabotaging Africa's future. He threatened sanctions. asset freezes, restrictions on exports. But instead of fear, Africa responded with defiance. Protesters filled city squares chanting, "Better hungry and free than full in chains." And across the continent, unity grew. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, the Sahel alliance tightened their bonds. Together, they pledged to resist resource-backed IMF contracts and explore alternatives. BRICS partnerships, blockchain systems, pooled gold reserves. Could regional unity, not foreign aid, become Africa's strongest shield? The collapse of the Phoenix. By late 2025, the Grand Phoenix Dollar Plan was collapsing. Without African resources, the program lost its foundation. What was meant to secure $500 billion in digital U.S. currency now stood on sand. The irony was brutal. The Phoenix, meant to symbolize rebirth, burned before it could fly. Washington's innovation now looked like desperation. And in Africa, something extraordinary was happening. For the first time in generations, the continent wasn't begging for relief. It was setting its own terms. The summit of dignity, the climax, came in Bamako. Under blazing lights, Traoré stood before a hall of African leaders. Alone, they can sanction us. But united, they cannot break us. The room erupted. The Sahel Alliance announced it was suspending IMF contracts, some even canceling them outright. It was more than a policy move, it was a declaration of self-respect. Africa's greatest resource, it turned out, wasn't beneath the soil. It was its people, their will, their unity, their refusal to be collateral ever again. Closing reflection, Burkina Faso still faces hardship. Its citizens still labor through shortages and struggles. But they chose dignity over dependency. And in doing so, they may have set a precedent that echoes far beyond their borders, because true sovereignty isn't measured by loans, forgiven, it's measured by the courage to refuse when refusal is just . And now, the question turns to you. What do you think? Was this defiance reckless, or was it the beginning of Africa's true independence? If this story moved you, share it widely. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Because when truth is spoken aloud, it must echo until no one can silence it.